Welcome back to the deep dive. There's this myth that the most important decisions are made in these big marble buildings in D.C.
Right, all the ceremonial pens.
Exactly. But if you really want to see where life happens, where safety and housing and money actually collide, you have to look at your local city council.
It's the difference between theory and practice, isn't it? Federal law is an idea, local government is. It's the pothole that wrecks your car.
Or the siren that wakes you up. And today, we are diving into the Gilroy City Council regular meeting from January 26, 2026. We've got the agenda, the staff reports, the full transcript.
It works.
And I'll be honest, I went into this thinking it would be a dry discussion on, zoning. What I found was this incredible study on the limits of control.
That's a great way to put it. You see a council that's technically in charge, but they're constantly hitting these barriers.
Barriers like what?
Oh, jurisdictional lines, global supply chains, and just the sheer force of human tragedy.
Let's start right there with tragedy, because the first half hour of this meeting was incredibly heavy. The transcript opens with public comment, and it was not the usual stuff.
No. The whole room was responding to a fatal incident at Los Animas Elementary School that had just happened on January 16th.
A really devastating event. A teen driver hit two parents, Mr. and Mrs. Stewart, right after they dropped their child off at school.
And both parents died. It's just unimaginable.
It is. But what struck me reading the transcript wasn't just the grief. It was how fast the residents pivoted to action. You had speakers like Cindy Nunes and Brenda Hogg, a teacher there.
Right.
They didn't just come to be sad. They came to report what they've been forced to do.
That part was incredible. They've essentially deputized themselves. They're out there in high-visibility vests, acting as crossing guards.
As human shields, because they feel like the infrastructure just completely failed them.
And Brenda Hogg, the teacher, she mentioned they're begging for the basics.
Yeah.
School zone painted on the street, solar-powered pedestrian beacons, speed bumps.
These seem like such, simple asks. Why does it take a tragedy to even get them on the agenda?
Well, gets right to the burden of local government. Congress debates policy, right? An idea. City council manages liability and physical space.
They're the direct recipients of this grief.
Exactly. They're the ones who have to approve the actual budget line for the beacons or the work order for the bank crew. It's not an abstract debate about safety.
It's a work order for a specific street corner. And these residents aren't asking for some 5-year study. They're saying, we are standing in the street right now.
And that just creates this massive pressure cooker for the council. They have to balance that immediate, totally justified emotional demand against the slow gears of traffic studies and budgets.
So the council is sort of a buffer between the community's pain and the bureaucracy.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Well, speaking of buffers and bureaucracy, that brings us to the second huge crisis of the night. If the first part was about safety infrastructure, this next one was about the breakdown of social infrastructure. We have to talk about Camp Hope.
This was the main event of the public comment, for sure. Camp Hope is a homeless encampment. It's near the 6th Street Bridge.
Right by Costco. And the context here is absolutely critical. A sweep and eviction was scheduled for February 3rd.
Just days after this meeting.
But reading the testimony, this just didn't sound like the usual story we hear about encampments. You had residents, advocates, people like Graham Melville and Robert Aguirre.
From the Gilroy Union of the Homeless.
Right. And they were describing this place in almost utopian terms. They kept using the word sovereign.
They did. And that word choice is so specific. They're making an argument that this isn't just, a bunch of tents.
They're saying it's a self-governing community. Aubrey Tasby, they called him the de facto mayor of the camp. Wow. He claimed they have their own rules, they keep it clean, and this is the big one. He claimed 0 police calls for service in months.
Which is a bold claim.
Yeah.
And you even had Vanessa from an organization called Rooted, who called the camp's self-organization a miracle.
So the argument was basically, look, we've solved the problem ourselves. We're stable. Why are you breaking this up?
It really challenges the city's usual narrative, which is that encampments are chaotic, they're dangerous. Here, the residents are saying the sweep is what creates the chaos.
But, and here's the twist, and it fits our theme of limits of control, the city council was hearing all this, but they were pretty much powerless to stop it.
Because of who owns the dirt.
Exactly. The land belongs to the water district, not the city of Gilroy.
And that's a classic case of what you could call bureaucratic paralysis.
It seems like it. You have a human crisis, you have what might be a community solution with this sovereign camp, but because of a line on a map, the city just says its hands are tied.
It's a perfect example of how these jurisdictional boundaries can actually prevent humanitarian solutions. The speakers were saying the water district is pushing the removal, but the impact, all the displaced people, that falls on the city.
So the council is stuck in this bizarre middle ground where they get all the moral heat for an eviction they didn't technically order on land they don't even control.
Right. And there was a moment that really drove that home. A resident named Thomas, he actually played a recording of his family for the council. It was raw.
He wasn't talking about policy. He was talking about fear.
And it forces the council to confront the gap between, legal compliance and human welfare. The water district wants the land cleared. The city deals with the fallout.
And the residents of Camp Hope are just stuck in the middle.
In the crevice between those two agencies.
So we've got a community building its own safety net because the streets are dangerous, and another community building its own housing because the system is failing.
That's a very keen observation. In both cases, the school safety and the camp, you see citizens stepping into a vacuum of governance.
Okay, let's pivot from that to a group that is definitely not operating in a vacuum, but is creating a very different kind of pressure. Let's talk about Amazon Web Services.
From the most marginalized residents to the most capitalized corporation on the planet.
The whiplash in these meetings is something else. So the issue is the construction of a new AWS data center. Usually complaints are about, dust or traffic.
The usual stuff.
But a speaker named Laura Phillips brought up something I had never even thought about. Low-frequency noise.
This is a huge emerging issue in urban planning, especially with server farms. She's not talking about a jackhammer. She's talking about the cooling systems, the giant banks of fans and chillers.
And they just emit this constant low-pitch hum. She claimed it can penetrate walls for up to 2 miles.
That's the physics of it. Low-frequency sound waves, they travel further, and they're much harder to block than high-frequency noise. And she mentioned she has a grandson with autism.
I saw that.
And for neurodivergent people, that inescapable background vibration can be, torture.
And her whole point was that the city's rule book, their ordinances, they aren't ready for this kind of thing.
Exactly. Most noise ordinances are written for, loud parties or leaf blowers, temporary things. They aren't written for a 247 industrial hum.
So the residents want a third-party expert because they don't trust Amazon to self-report, and they don't trust the city to even understand the technical side of it.
It's the David and Goliath dynamic, right? You've got this trillion-dollar company and a local city council. The residents are asking, do you guys even have the expertise to regulate them?
Which is a totally fair question. Cities are desperate for that tax revenue, the economic expansion the speakers mentioned.
But those dollars come with these invisible costs. The council has to decide if that hum is the sound of progress or if it's the sound of a public health hazard.
Well, speaking of that tax revenue and the weird relationship between the city and Amazon, let's move to the business of running a city. Because we found a connection in the consent calendar that is just, it's really ironic.
You're talking about item 6.1, the fire engine.
The Rosenbauer Type 1 fire engine. The city approved the purchase. The price tag is staggering. It's $1,058,224.31.
A lot of money.
But here's the kicker. Where's a big chunk of that money coming from?
Amazon. The staff report notes that Amazon provided $1 million toward this purchase.
So on one hand, you have residents begging the council to protect them from Amazon's noise pollution.
And on the other, the council is taking Amazon's check to buy the fire truck that protects the residents.
It creates this really complicated feedback loop. It's got to be hard to be a tough regulator on a company that's also funding your essential safety equipment.
It totally blurs the line between corporate neighbor and municipal benefactor.
But let's talk about the truck itself for a second. Because even with Amazon's cash, this thing isn't showing up anytime soon. The wait time is listed at 27 months.
27 months. That's over 2 years.
Over 2 years. If they order it now, in early 2026, they're hoping to see it by mid-2028. Why?
Well, a Type 1 engine isn't an F-150 you pick up at the dealership. It's a custom fabricated piece of machinery. But really, that 27-month lead time, that's a symptom of the broken global supply chain for heavy components.
Chassis, microchips, specialized pumps.
All of it. And it just highlights another one of those limits of control for the council. They have the money, thanks to Amazon, but they can't control the manufacturing reality.
That's a scary thought. They're buying this for 2028. What happens if an engine breaks down next month?
That's the risk they're taking. They're betting their current fleet can hold on until the new cavalry arrives.
So while we're on money, there was a a pretty technical but important debate about a new capital infrastructure reserve fund.
Ah, yes, the savings account debate.
Right. Break this down for us. What was the argument about?
Okay, so think of the city's general fund as their checking account. Pays the bills, cops, parks, salaries. The staff wants to create a dedicated savings account, the capital reserve, for big projects like park renovations.
And the plan is to skim the change off the top of the checking account at the end of the year and put it into savings.
Exactly. But Councilmember Hilton had an issue with the phrase up to 25%.
He wanted a guarantee. He was arguing that up to 25% could also mean zero.
Yeah, he wanted to force future councils to save money for parks. But the staff, specifically Finance Director Harjad Sangha, pushed back for flexibility.
Why?
His argument was basically, we need to keep the checking account healthy first. He wants to keep a 30% reserve in the general fund for emergencies before they start locking money away for parks.
So it's the classic tension, political promises versus fiscal prudence.
That's it. We promise parks versus we need to make payroll if the economy crashes.
And right in the middle of all this high finance talk, a public commenter, Ron Kirkish, comes in with this really skeptical take on electric vehicles.
Ron's a regular, and he used the phrase, Greeks bearing gifts. He was warning them about a grant for an EV fleet.
His point was that the free money to buy the cars isn't really free when you factor in maintenance and tires and battery replacements down the line.
Yeah, he even pointed to Hertz selling off its EV fleet as a big warning sign.
Yeah.
It's a valid check on the enthusiasm, you know?
Yeah.
The grant covers the purchase, but the city's on the hook for the life of the vehicle.
Okay, we've hit tragedy, homelessness, corporate power, and finance. We have to talk about the political drama. Let's get to the Planning Commission appointment.
Item 4.1. This is just pure political theater.
So there's a seat open on the Planning Commission, which is a really powerful spot. They decide what gets built where.
A huge deal. And there were two main candidates. On one side, you have Britt Smith.
The activist, the
Yeah.
same woman who spoke so passionately about the data centers earlier in the meeting.
She's an agitator, she's organized, she's deep in the community pushback.
And on the other side, you have Payman Kodabanda.
A tech executive.
Mhm.
Polished, corporate background,
Mhm.
very resume ready.
And the council split right down the middle, 3-3.
It was fascinating to watch this play out. Councilmember Broco, he backed Britt Smith. He said he valued her passion and her ability to challenge things. He wants to disrupt her.
But Councilmember Ramirez backed Payman, and she used this very telling phrase. She said he had an aligned professional demeanor.
Which is a polite way of saying something else.
It is. And she suggested Britt needed some mentoring up on a lower commission first.
A polite way of saying she's too radical for the Planning Commission. And this just shows the fundamental split in the council. Do you want a commissioner who smooths the road for development or one who throws speed bumps in front of it?
And because one council member was absent, the vote deadlocked. The seat stays empty.
Which has real consequences. So now the city is facing a housing crisis, huge development pressure, and the body that approves those projects is shorthanded because the council can't agree on the type of person they want in the room.
It's deadlock by design. Okay, before we close out, we have to mention the Wild West.
Yes. Councilmember Fugazi's description of the food truck scene.
Mobile vending. They extended a pilot program. And Fugazi called the time before they had regulations the Wild West.
Yeah, the issue is trucks just parking overnight in public lots, turning them into their private kitchens. It's another one of those growing pains.
And finally, they approved over $300,000 to update the park's master plan. Why does a plan cost that much, and why now?
Well, the last one was written 20 years ago.
Okay, fair enough.
Think about 20 years ago. No iPhones, definitely no e-bikes. The Public Works Director made a great point. The way we use parks has fundamentally changed. The trails are now basically highways for electric scooters and one-wheels.
So the city has to redesign the physical space just to keep people from running each other over.
Exactly. The world changed, and the master plan is just playing catch-up.
So when you look back at this whole meeting, we started with a tragedy that showed the need for physical safety. We moved to a homeless encampment that showed the need for shelter and autonomy. We saw Amazon's money buying fire trucks while its servers caused noise.
And if there's one single takeaway, it's that friction we talked about at the start. You have residents who are moving incredibly fast, They're organizing their own camps, acting as their own crossing guards, adopting e-bikes.
And then you have the city, which is, it's constrained by jurisdiction, by supply chains, by procedure.
The community is improvising solutions because it has to. The city is trying to regulate those solutions because it's required to.
And the real tension is, does the city crush those improvised solutions like that sovereign camp, or does it find a way to incorporate them?
That is the challenge of modern local governance.
And that is why you should read your local city council agenda, because hidden in those PDFs are the struggles of people just trying to make a community work, one speed bump and one fire truck at a time.
Absolutely. It's the most important reading you can do.
That's it for this deep dive into the Gilroy City Council. We'll see you next time.